Juberg, and I'm with the Global Compassion Coalition, an online community with a mission to build a world based on compassion. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Olga Klimecki, a neuroscientist and psychologist. She's currently interim chair of biological psychology at Technische Universität Dresden, Germany. Her research focuses on the promotion of mental and physical health across the lifespan. She also studies topics related to conflict resolution, neuroplasticity, and meditation. We're so excited to have you on our today's show. Thank you so much for joining us today, Olga.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I've seen your work, and it's such a privilege to be in front of you and have a chance to just learn a little bit more about you, your path, and specifically your research. And I might just start off very simply. How did you become a neuropsychologist and a neuroscientist and a psychologist?
Well, I started studying psychology out of my interest for the human being and also for the biological basis of it. And at the time, the more neuroscientific approach wasn't available in Germany. So I started my studies in Germany. And throughout my studies, I took various courses. I also took summer schools. And during one of my summer schools, I took a course with Carl Friston and Klaus Enno Stephan. And Carl Friston is one of the big pioneers when it comes to analyzing data from functional magnetic resonance imaging, which allows us to actually look into the brain's activity of humans without stripping their skull open. And I was so fascinated by this work that I then decided to go to London and study neuroscience there. And then I did my PhD in psychology, and I continued this path, which tightly merges neuroscience and psychology.
Very interesting. And where are you currently?
As you said, I'm currently working at the Technische Universität Dresden, but I'm calling in from Poland right now, where I originally come from.
Beautiful. And so, being Polish, are you hoping to eventually teach in Poland, or is it kind of your path as an academic is to travel the world and to partner with universities around the world?
Yeah, I see myself more in the latter version. So I have colleagues in Poland with whom I work, but I also have colleagues in very many countries, ranging from Asia to Europe to the Americas, and also I'm working with people in various countries in Africa. So I really see myself more as a globally interconnected person, and yeah, with the great joy of collaborating with people who have a lot of expertise in their fields, and yeah.
Beautiful. And what are some of the studies that you're working on right now that you're most excited for?
Well, maybe I'll start with one study that we just started in August, and this is a training for older people, for older adults, an online training where they train with music and movement and mindfulness twice a week online, and we test how it impacts their well-being, their physical well-being, their mental well-being. And it's quite exciting because we found people from various areas. This is a study in Germany, but from various areas in Germany, and we're very curious to seeing the results. We've also finished a study that's a collaboration with colleagues in Geneva on training medical students in mindfulness, and we just finished the data collection now in the summer. We're curious what the data will bring, so this is exciting as well. And we've just recently started partnering with the PISA team, so with the evaluation of capacities of students of schools. And usually this is on maths, performance, or reading or writing skills, but they expanded that to socio-emotional well-being and to other capacities. And we'd like to test that in the future with biological measures and behavioral measures. So there's a lot of exciting collaborations going on, and I'm very happy to be part of that.
Beautiful. Well, I'm excited, and my ears perked up when I heard that you're doing a meditation and mindfulness intervention, but it includes a component of music. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And
We,
so is that the intervention itself, or are you just measuring whether or not people are listening to music differently when they're a part of this intervention?
that is the intervention itself. So there is research coming mainly from animal models that enriched environments are very good for animals. So environments in which they just don't live in one single cage. This is mainly studies in mice, but in which they have a variety of places they can go to, they can explore, and to really stimulate them in a multisensory way. And we have found with colleagues in joint work and also in other publications that we read from other colleagues, there is a consistent finding that a kind of environmental enrichment is also beneficial for adults or for humans. So when you learn, for instance, musical instruments as a child, or when you're doing sports as a child, and when you continue doing that in your adult life, you age better. So we test older adults, and we find that they have more preserved brains. They have better cognitive capacities when they have an enriched life in terms of speaking different languages, traveling, playing musical instruments, and doing sports. And so, what we want to offer with this training now for the older adults is an enriched environment where they don't just meditate, but they also learn some movements to music, that it's more fun and it's more multisensory, because the belief is really that this multisensory stimulation, also the movement is important, helps you to enrich your environment, and this promotes in turn a certain thriving and a certain well-being.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've been in the field of mindfulness and contemplative sciences for so long, and I've not really heard um, a lot of mapping of mindfulness with music, and especially when we're looking at the, neurophysiological correlates or what's really going on. I think that's quite novel. Is there any evidence in front of us within the mindfulness realm that shows that music and dancing specifically enhances the benefits of meditation and mindfulness?
I also think it's quite new. There are quite a few studies on music and movement. This exists. So these are studies, a lot of colleagues in California do this. We also did some data analyses on, and we also find that, or colleagues of mine find, one of our students found this, that music in general and also movement in your life enhances your aging process. So people age better when they dance, when they move in life. This is well known that sports is beneficial. But this combination between the music and the movement and the mindfulness, that's quite new, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I find myself personally, when I'm ever stuck in a meditation, sometimes I'll go back and pair it with certain types of music, and it actually helps me kind of fall back on track with my meditation. And so I noticed that, just like in the same way that you're saying a different environment can be very enriching, I think the same might even be true for the environment in which we place ourselves, even in terms of meditating, right? We certainly
Yeah.
see that contemplative studies is multifaceted, where it's not just sitting on the mat and meditating, but it's also yoga, Tai Chi. And so I like that idea that it might not just be enriching, but it might actually fit some people better if they can't physically sit and just maintain a calmness for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Maybe a little music, maybe a little movement would help them get to the same place of mind, and hopefully, as hopefully your science can show, might have optimal health benefits as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the idea. And I mean, also the basic idea with the mindfulness practice is that it's not just there for the cushion, but ideally we come to a place where we can maintain our mindfulness throughout the day. So no matter whether we are eating or working or going someplace, the ideal state would be to actually maintain this state of awareness, of kindness. And so this, I think, the training we offer to our participants is going into this direction, to really embody this mindfulness whenever you move your arm, whenever you listen to music, whenever you move yourself in space. Yeah.
Do you think from a neurophysiological lens, like you have maybe I'm even saying this wrong. It's enhancing kind of the neural tracts, whether it's white matter, gray matter. Like, what's your take from a neuroscientific lens? What do you think might be actually happening on the neurological level?
Yeah, so we do think it helps to preserve brain integrity. So it might help to preserve white matter tracts, yes, potentially through a reduction in inflammation. But we are on the road as a community, but we know that mindfulness can reduce inflammation, and we know that inflammation in turn can damage white matter in the brain. So it's probably that through reducing inflammation we can maintain white matter tracts, which are actually um, basically like a sheath across the neural connections that help to preserve communication in the brain. We also hope that it will help to maintain the structure of the brain and to also change the functioning of the brain. So the way we react emotionally and also physiologically is, of course, represented in brain functions. So we hope to just change this entire response to situations, right? To make us more caring, to make us more aware of things, and this can be reflected in neural functions as well.
Beautiful. So I see you naturally forming the bridge between like mindfulness and meditation, neuroplasticity, but you're actually drawing it to the real world where, you know, we're biological creatures, we're social creatures, we're navigating our way through a very hectic and sometimes busy lives. How do you think your research then connects back to conflict resolution?
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, I mean, since the beginning of my studies, I was interested in interpersonal behavior in social spaces. And then at some point, I realized that there is not so much work on strategies that can help causally to resolve conflicts. There is a lot of work in social psychology, but there are biases in this work, and a lot of the techniques that have been promoted throughout decades did not receive a very rigorous testing. And with rigorous, I mean like with randomized controlled trials, with different settings in different countries, to see whether these interventions can really have the impact that we'd like them to have. And so I started also working in the domain of conflict resolution, of intergroup behaviors. Conflict resolution, in our case, is between people. It can be between one person and another person. It can be in couples. And sometimes we also study it between groups, even in very violent conflicts. So we also did studies in Israel with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that was before last year. And we also did studies in South Sudan, for instance, or in other countries. So yeah, I think mindfulness can help in this way. And this is the model we use, is by improving a person's overall well-being, and then this overall well-being and kindness and awareness might then transfer to the conflict situation. So this is the key result from our work and from work of colleagues, is that if you improve the well-being of a person in general, especially the emotional well-being, with feelings of hope, of kindness, of gratitude, then these feelings can transfer by themselves to, or in the person, to the conflictual situation, and help in resolving this conflictual situation, or in ameliorating the relations between people and between groups.
Yeah, on that note, I read that one of your papers actually specifically looked at how compassion training increases feelings of closeness towards a disliked person. Could you tell us a little bit about that study, how you set that up and what you found?
Yeah, and I should mention that this study was the PhD work of Patricia Senadas Curoto, who I have the pleasure of, we've been working together for about 10 years now. So in Patricia's work, she basically invited participants and asked them to name a difficult person in their lives. And this could be from any area. So participants sometimes took someone from their workplace, sometimes they took a person from their family or from their friends or ex-partners. And then we had little stories. So we had little stories. Imagine whatever the name of your difficult person is, has an important job interview, and he's on his way to the job interview, and with a cup of coffee in his hand, and then he spills the coffee over his shirt. And then we asked participants, when you read this, how do you feel? So do you feel malicious joy or schadenfreude? Do you feel compassion for that person, a feeling of kindness and care? Or how close do you feel to that person? And we had these stories before the training and after the training. And in between, participants were randomized. So this is important in testing causal effects. We have to randomize participants. So we randomized them to either a 5-week compassion training or a 5-week training in emotion regulation or a 5-week training in Italian. So they learned a foreign language to make it fun and to have an active control group. And what Patricia found is that basically the compassion training not only increases compassion for the difficult person. And I should mention, this is important, that neither in the compassion training, nor in the emotion regulation training, nor of course in the Italian training, did we ever speak about the difficult person. So these trainings were really focused on the participant. So in the compassion training, participants thought of a person they liked and cultivated feelings of kindness and compassion towards this person. They did that for themselves, and they cultivated kindness and compassion for all beings in general. And in the emotion regulation training, they also went through situations that were related to themselves, but we did not mention the difficult person in any of the trainings, also not in the Italian training, of course. And then we saw the transfer effect. So the compassion training transferred to the situation with a difficult person, because when we asked participants after the training how compassionate they feel when the person, for instance, spills the coffee over their shirt, or when something else happens, we observed increased ratings of compassion for that difficult person. We observed decreased ratings of malicious joy after the compassion training and the emotion regulation training. And we observed an increase in feelings of closeness only after the compassion training for the difficult person. So there was a kind of natural transfer of this feeling of care to the situation with a difficult person. And research also from other labs shows that this transfer effect, or this indirect way of changing emotions to promote social relations, is the better way. And we've also done another study previously where I tried to change the emotions of the participants directly in a conflict situation, and it backfired. So when I tried to increase the empathy or the perspective taking of people before a conflict around immigration, it didn't work well. So I can highly recommend these indirect techniques, which really focus on the person and their own well-being, and then to hope that this will transfer to conflictual situations.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think there's so much rich debate going on in the field about whether or not we can directly address some of the most pressing problems in the world today of othering, right? I mean, there's fill in a blank depending on what country or cultural context you're coming from. And when we think about that, it's hard to train people to not do the thing that might be causing a lot of social conflict, or it maybe even violent conflict, right? But when we are using mindfulness and compassion-based trainings, we see that these things naturally attenuate, right? We see these things kind of resolve themselves. And it just begs the question, I mean, is this something that, for people who are older, is this something that we offer training to? Do they have to come in with a clinical psychopathology before they get it? Or is this something that we even start at a young age so that, the next generation of youth kind of grow up with this socio-emotional learning, and that over time will eventually diminish the likelihood of these interpersonal, intergroup disputes? What's your take on that?
So in general, I think that mindfulness-based techniques can be started at any age. You mainly start them in adulthood. Of course, they also can be used in older adulthood. I think for children, they need to be adapted, or for youngsters, they need to be adapted. The interventions, the training sessions, they need to be shortened and adapted to being a bit more lighter, maybe to being a bit lighter and a bit more concrete, maybe a bit more sensory as well. Focusing on different senses is important. And in general, I think the important question for me is not so much is it a certain age, but if we adapt it to the age range, can we actually, how does the person react? So does the person who's part of the people who are being trained, does a single person benefit from the training or not? So we see it in all of our studies that there's a big variety in responses to these trainings. So in all my studies, there are some people who benefit. There are some people who basically don't change much on the measures we take. And there are some people who report either on our measures or in self-reports that mindfulness wasn't really their thing, that it was difficult for them, or that it even caused them a significant amount of discomfort. And we know that there can be significant adverse effects also from mindfulness training. So I think wherever we teach mindfulness-based techniques, whether it's in schools or in adulthood or in older age, it's very important to always take into consideration the individual response of the person and to offer a training that's trauma-informed and adapted to the person's needs. So a training that can be adapted to whatever needs a person has, even if that means discontinuing the training.
Very interesting. Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, it sounds like we started talking about mindfulness, and it kind of shifted gears into compassion. Do you find that mindfulness and compassion research and trainings are naturally aligned, or do you think they're two different things?
For me, they are very close. So when I think of even mindfulness in general, I like the definition that mindfulness is like a bird with two wings, where it has the wing of awareness, where you are aware of your sensations, of your feelings, of your thoughts, of your body posture, of whatever you are experiencing. Actually, you are aware of your experience. That's one wing. And the other wing is the wing of kindness and compassion, because you meet each and every one of these experiences with kindness and compassion. And so for me, the fundamental mindfulness is tightly intertwined with compassion and kindness. So metta and karuna, for instance, and the other Brahma Viharas, of course, as well. And also the compassion and kindness side, it cannot exist without a certain awareness of what's happening, right? So for me, these two concepts are very close, and sometimes I use them almost interchangeably, although in our interventions, sometimes we place more emphasis on one aspect or the other. But in any case, they are, at least for me, very tightly intertwined. Yeah.
Very nice. I'm familiar with a lot of neuroscientific research that looks at mindfulness. Have you seen the same amount of interest when it comes to compassion?
Less so, but
less so.
yeah, of course, there is at some point less research in compassion than in mindfulness, because the mindfulness has a lot, for instance, with the mindfulness-based stress reduction courses, has more visibility. But in recent years, I'd say over the past, 15 years, the research in compassion has risen, and the interest in compassion, self-compassion in clinical settings and non-clinical settings, extending up to violent intergroup conflicts, has risen. So I think there is more interest also in the emotional side of things, which is represented more in the compassionate field. And this rise in interest, I think, comes along with the rise in the interest in research in emotions in general, which has started in the 90s already, but is continuing to rise, because we continue to recognize as researchers, and maybe also as individuals, that emotions do play a crucial role in in guiding our behaviors, our feelings, of course, but also our thoughts. So they are pretty impactful, and it's worthwhile studying them. Yeah.
Very nice. And as far as it sounds like you've in the beginning of the show you mentioned a few studies, 3 studies that you had going. Are there any kind of pie in the sky studies that you would love to do? Maybe it's not quite the right time, or maybe the technology is there, but in the future you would love to have. Is there a certain question that you'd really think would be valuable to address?
Yeah. I'm, I think the project we're working on currently that hasn't, well, we haven't started with the data acquisition yet, is the question that I currently find most important, which I mean is a bit evident and obvious, but this is the question of whether we can, with a certain training in mindfulness and compassion and other socio-emotional skills, impact the intergroup relations and the well-being of young people across the world. Because I think what is really lacking is this cross-cultural understanding. So we know, for instance, from recent years, that a lot of the findings that have been have resulted from studies in North America, so the USA and Canada, and also in Europe, they cannot so easily be transferred to other settings, other countries. And I think we have to take a very global perspective, and before making claims that something works in this way in general, I think it's important to really do these cross-cultural studies to take into account the different backgrounds of people, to see what is the also global situation in the country. So is this a country in war? Is this a war context? What's the conflict situation in the country? And so on, so that we can ideally in maybe 100 years have a map of which intervention to use under what circumstances. So to really have the understanding, okay, if this is the level of conflict, if this is the kind of culture of the country, and these are the individuals in my group, then this training or this intervention could be beneficial. And I think together with a lot of colleagues worldwide, we are working on this map from different angles, and sometimes jointly, sometimes not. And I think this map will be what I would like to see, or at least a better map than we have currently. Yeah.
That's certainly ambitious, and I love to hear that. I think there's so much to be said about it. When I think about international conflict, we're talking about sometimes leaders and political teams kind of at war. But I think the hope that I hear from your research is that, you know, we can do a lot to empower the individual, and with the interpersonal benefits that spills out to the interpersonal benefits, which then kind of extrapolates to the, you know, the intergroup benefits, which is how are we understanding each other by understanding ourselves? How do we improve our relationships with our neighbors by improving the relationship with ourselves? And, you know, I don't think naturally people would think that intergroup conflict is the domain of psychologists, but it seems like we have such a valuable role to at least attempt to answer that. And it seems like the work that you and your colleagues are doing really take ambitious aim, and it is unbelievably valuable. And I so look forward to hearing how that goes. And this is something I'm sure I can check back in a few years, and we have a little bit more of that map. And I'm sure even beyond you and I, you know, people will be following in your steps, trying to answer that question better. So, Olga, this is unbelievably exciting, and I'm so grateful that you're giving your time and your energy to such important questions.
Well, thank you for also your time and energy in these questions. And I think it has been more and more recognized. So when you think of the Sustainable Development Goals that are supported by many of the nations in the world, it has been recognized that we will not reach the goal of sustainable education, of peace, etc., without inner transformation. So this this link between the inner transformation that an individual does and then the societal effects it has been recognized. But we need to understand this more. We need more research to know what the mechanisms are, what the processes are to make this individual transformation, and then to see how the individual transformation maps out on the societal level, on the interpersonal level, and on the societal level.
Well, Dr. Olga Kilmecki, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. Where our community is so grateful for the work you're doing, and we certainly hope to have you back on the show down the line to hear how these projects are going. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, here we'll stop recording, but I think we can still talk. So one second.